Muslim world has witnessed unimaginable political turmoil, and it has come to terms with the realities of time, may it be Egypt, Iran, Tunisia or Pakistan. Muslims came to India with the motivation to serve their religion, Islam. But did they convert India into an Islamic country? They did not. BJP, which has ruled India for over 14 years now, has it converted India into a Hindu Rashtra? Many would argue that it has become a Hindu Rashtra. But is that a reality or just a perception? Welcome to The Matrix. Before we start our discussion with my learned guest, Dr. Khwaja Iftikhar Ahmed, let's first watch this video of Prime Minister Modi's interaction with Rashid Ahmed Qadri, who's a Padma awardee and who's a crafts artist.
मैं वीज़ा करना हमारे पीरियड में 5 साल तक कोई इकरार नहीं हुआ। उसके बाद में खामोश बैठ गया कि बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट चाहिए या हमको नहीं देती। मगर आप मेरा ख्याल गलत साबित करके मेरे को चुनिए, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
The question I raised today is, should Indian Muslims reimagine their political reality? Why is it that when Ummah worldwide has come to terms with the changing times, Indian Muslims are lagging behind and resisting political realities? Will this do them any good, or will it lead to irreparable damage for the community? We assume that BJP cannot do any good for Indian Muslims. Can we allow this assumption to overtake reason? I now quote from Irfan Habib's book on Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, where he says, Maulana once cited the Quran, stating, "The worst creatures in God's eyes are those who are willfully dumb and deaf, who do not reason." Dr. Khwaja Sahab, now I ask you, what are the political options of Indian Muslims today?
Thank you so much for inviting me and for having a topic which is of national relevance and also of national consequence. My take on this subject is that after the unfortunate and tragic partition of India, the Indian Muslim leadership should have sit down and determine its priorities as Indian Muslims in a partitioned India. Right. That was the core subject which should have been at the center of attention for the leadership of that time. Unfortunately, not only that time was lost, even when we are celebrating Amrit Mahotsav, 75 years of our independence, the Muslim intellectuals, the Muslim leadership, whatever it is, in whatever form and formation it is available to us, it has failed to take the call of the time. Since you have put up your question specifically regarding BJP and the Indian Muslims, I straight away come to the question. Number one, isn't BJP a national political party? Isn't BJP a national political ground reality? Isn't BJP ruling at the center for almost 9 years? In the first term with a mixed majority and now with a thumping majority? My question to my community remains that when are the Muslims of India and the Muslim leaders and the Muslim organizations and the Muslim intelligentsia are going to take the call of the time?
Right.
When BJP is a political reality on ground, and I've been talking on this line for the last 25 years, not now. From 1996, when Vajpayee came into power for the first time for 13 days, I raised this question. I wrote an article also on this particular issue, that Muslims should take a call. Unfortunately, since they haven't taken the call, the unrequired, undesirable gulf between the BJP the BJPites, the Sangh Parivar and Muslims, this gulf is unfortunately increasing, which is very unfortunate. And Mr. Atir, that I had written a book by the title, The Meeting of Minds, a Bridging Initiative. The thrust and the crux of the issue that I have raised in my book basically is what exactly is your first question. So my answer to your question, to sum up that, would be that Muslims are too late in determining their political priorities. Muslims are too late in taking a call on BJP. I do not see that if there are some differences are natural. It requires intellectual discourse. It doesn't require distancing or detaching a situation. So it is a call and it is too late, but it should be taken up.
Dr. Khwaja, many people say that the relations between the BJP and Muslims are at an all-time low. There is no minister in the Union Cabinet who represents the community. There's very little representation. So do you think this is a fair point which people make?
In a democracy, all voices, all segments of the population should have their share. This is a very balanced view. And under the present circumstances, when we analyze the situation, we should not analyze the situation in isolation of the situation in totality. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, there is not a single Muslim elected MLA. On one hand, Muslims ask for tickets.
Right.
And when the tickets are given, they leave no stone unturned to ensure that the Muslim candidate of BJP has not only to be defeated, but his deposits have to be lost and forfeited. This is the policy. Coming to center, in center, there was a time when there were 4 members in Rajya Sabha. In Lok Sabha, unfortunately, not a single Muslim representative we had.
Right.
Yes, I would urge the leadership of the day, Shri Narendra Modi ji in particular, that all efforts must be made to substantiate his slogan on which he and his team is working very hard, that it's a country belonging to all, and all belong to this country, so everybody should have an equal and equitable share. At present, it looks as if there is a vacuum. And I would say, having trust in the style of Modi ji's governance, having trust in the larger objectives of BJP to have a final understanding with the larger Muslim community, his recent initiative of prioritizing the Pasmanda Muslim Samaj, which is almost 90% of the community. All these initiatives, I think, to a large extent, convince me not to take a hard position where I say that Muslims have no representation. I urge on representation, and I'm sure that in the time to come, Modi ji must be thinking about correcting the situation.
Dr. Khwaja, you talked about that the Muslim community is already too late in reaching out. But then, does that mean that the gulf has widened so much? Will it actually be possible for BJP to accommodate Muslims at this point of time?
2 aspects of your question. One is that the gulf has increased too much. I am not willing to subscribe to this view, and there is a logic behind this. The amount of engagement between the BJP and the RSS for the last few years has increased multifold. This in itself is a signal and an indicator that the engagement has started. Engagement is a process. It takes time to evolve, to mature, and to conclude. So I think the community is passing through this phase. So having a conclusion that the gulf has increased so much that there is no scope left, no. There is plenty of scope, and both sides are analyzing the situation and evaluating the situation and intensely engaging with that situation. So that's about the gulf part. The second part is that if BJP takes the Muslim subject on a priority basis, is it going to be a risk for its current clientele? The question basically is this.
Right.
I think there was a time, and I'm saying it very bluntly in your studio, there was a time when this stereotyped assumption or a notion was well grounded. But now, in the last 9 years, the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, the track record on ground, in the context of statistics, in the context of welfare schemes launched at the national level for the total population of the country, and the schemes specifically launched for minorities, specifically all the institutions which have minority at the core of them, even the institutions which are exclusively for Muslim, like the Central Waqf Board, like the Urdu academies, like the Ministry of Minority Affairs, like the Minorities Commission, like the National Commission for Minorities Educational Institutions. So having all that, and they are working as normally as they have been working before. In certain cases, the statistics are of the higher side. So assuming that taking a position by BJP to go out of the way to reach or to have an outreach with the Muslim community, the Modi ji's leadership now has crossed all the barriers and borders. He is a man of action. He is decisive, and he can afford any position on any subject. The country stands by him. His voters are not that weak that any of his positions in this direction, if he takes, they will leave him. Absolutely not.
So you mean to say that his performance has strengthened his position, that
yes, of course.
he can take the liberty of...
Of course.
All right.
Of course.
So...
in Mr. Modi, India has the strongest Prime Minister, and his willpower, is reflected in his actions. Not only on the domestic front, but look at the international front. Look at the diplomacy. Look at the way we have dealt with China. The way we are dealing with Pakistan, and the way we are dealing with other Muslim nations. He is the most popular Prime Minister of India among the Muslim nations.
Right, Dr. Khwaja. Then many people make it a point, and they assume that if Muslims support BJP, it'll worsen their situation. What is your take on this?
My take on this is that if Muslims, without any conditions, irrespective of what they hold as stereotypes, as notions, as inhibitions, as fears, or whatever, if they take a position to at least try one time, wholeheartedly vote, even if the ground is the worst, to take that route, I'm sure there will be a U-turn, and things will dramatically and drastically change for the better, and from the better to the best.
Right. But do you also think that if Muslims take, they try to build good relations with the BJP, it will also help rein in, fringe Hindu groups which are creating, off and on, they are creating problems, not just for the community, but for the entire nation. It gives India a bad name. What do you say?
I would say that the fringe elements are a greatest challenge to our civil society and to our government, and they are doing no good to Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister, or to the country. What they are doing is, in their wisdom, they may have whatever thoughts they have, but the fact of the matter is that they are giving enough content and material and instances and opportunities to the world media, where there is a vested section and segment to malign India on one count or the other. When there are so many positive scores to talk about, they look up to something, to pick up something which can malign India on its core values. And these fringe elements are the first enemy of the government of the day, of the leadership of the day, of Sangh Parivar of the day. They have to be contained, and they should be contained, and they should be controlled, because this is in our larger national interest. It is not a question of Hindu and Muslim. It is not a question of polarization. It is not a question of using polarization for winning seats and elections and so on. It is a question of the idea of India. When the idea of India is challenged, and what is the idea of India? The idea of India is that we are a strong, vibrant civil society. We value differences. We honor diversity. We are the heartland for the diversity. And here is a country where the diversity is celebrated. We don't fight on that. All these narratives, which are well grounded, they are being defeated by these elements. And I would urge Prime Minister Modi in particular that India, in the context of fringe elements, need an effective tongue management.
Right. Yeah, very interesting.
Yes. My term is tongue management.
Tongue management.
We need tongue management. Nothing is on ground, those things are not happening. But the perception is that as if everything has gone bad.
But Dr. Khwaja, then people also make a point that, it's not just tongue management. It's also about, the kind of violence, the kind of, the symbolism, which is out there, perhaps leads to some kind of insecurity among the Muslim community. That also needs to be controlled to a great extent. What do you say?
Atar, we had decades of symbolism. And Muslim politics never touched even an iota of realism. That has been very unfortunate. And that is why a Sachar committee, and that is why the Muslims have these conditions which they have. If you will not go with the mainstream, if you will not integrate yourself with the system, and if you will keep yourself as an isolated lot, for whatever reasons, you have to have problems. You have to face problems. So my take is, as I said before, that the Muslims of India have to come out with that ghetto mentality, have to come out with the typically stereotyped mentality. Learn, it is a world of challenge. It is a world of initiative. Let us learn to take initiative. What is harm? We are a democracy. Even if you take a chance, even if you take a risk, for how many years? After every 5 years, now here is a country, it's not 5 years alone. Every year there are elections in some state or the other.
Right.
So the process of choosing or process of rejecting the choice is a recurring phenomena in our Indian politics.
Sure.
So when such a vibrant and such an open system is available, why not initiative? Why is the risk missing?
Yeah. Dr. Khwaja, you made a very interesting point, the ghetto mentality.
Yes.
But do you actually hold Muslims for this ghettoization? This has happened since independence and over the decades. Who's responsible for this ghettoization of Muslims?
My first take, which I shared with you, that immediately after independence, what we had on 15th of August 1947, not just independent India. Pakistanis had independent Pakistan. What we had partitioned India.
Right.
And in that partition India, almost 45% of the Muslims, which were minority Muslims in Muslim majority states, they remained part of India and the idea of India. So when the ground has changed, the rules of business have changed, and a partition has happened on the basis of a religious affinity.
Right.
And you also come from the same affinity on which there is a partition done. So didn't that situation require the genius of the time in the Muslim leadership to sit down, assess the situation, redraw the lines of engagement, and redraw the priorities,
Right.
so that hurt, that guilt on this side, the hurt on this side, both have to find a line where they can reach a middle ground, and we could have started working together. Since that hasn't happened, therefore, the gulf and the gap between the BJP and the Sangh, which is having a different line of thought on Indian polity and political governance, it kept on increasing. Therefore, I say again and again that the priorities which had to be determined at that point of time, if that was not done at that point of time, it is not only a question of engaging with Sangh and the BJP. I would urge the Muslims now to sit down, apply their mind, apply their genius, have the proper analysis and evaluation of the last 75 years and come out with a draft agenda for the Muslim community which engages it with the time.
Right. So, Dr. Khwaja, also I also personally believe that it's ever since independence, this ghettoization of Muslims have happened all over India. It's not just in one particular pocket in Gujarat. It has happened all over India, and that's a reality. Do you think that the various governments or the various political parties have been collectively responsible for not stopping this ghettoization of Muslims?
There is, I think there is never a situation in which only one stake or one stakeholder is responsible. It's a collective situation. The Indian Muslims are part of Indian society. If you look at after partition, where were the Muslims living? The elite, most of the elite Muslims had left India. So it was the average or above average, lower middle class or middle class Muslims who were left. And they were living in congested localities all over India. So the ghettoization or concentration of Muslims is not a new phenomenon.
Right.
They have been living like that for centuries together. That was the culture of Muslims, the fact of the matter is. In a changed scenario, that should have changed. The Muslims should have created a situation where the majority people could have thought of living with them, and a vice versa situation should have been created. Unfortunately, here, both of us are somewhere down the line are responsible. It can be a question of who is more and who is less, but responsibility lies with both.
Right.
So that is something which is missing, and that has not been, neither it has been worked out, nor there have been enough work on this.
Do you think that there could be a way to work this out? And because I personally believe that the Muslims who are ghettoized, it further breeds isolation, perhaps hatred also for the other communities. What do you say?
The first and foremost thing which the Muslim community requires is that the leadership has to shift to intellectuals. The people who are living and running with the time, who are able to read the pulse of the time, who are able to see the challenge and the opportunity both, they are the ones who should be at the center of leadership, not the one who are living in the last 100 years, 150 years, 200 years. How long the Muslims are going to talk about the past, and what are they going to gain out of that? Though my position about the past is that the some of the Muslims who talk about that we have ruled for 800 years, I'm sorry, in the book and in public, I have held this position that Indian Muslims, primarily they are the indigenous community of this country.
Right.
Handful of people came from outside, and they were the rulers. They were the rulers.
Sure.
Arabs, they were not Indians. Afghans were not Indians. Iranians were not Indian.
Right.
Central Asians were not Indians. Mughals were not Indians. Mongols were not Indians. They were all outsiders.
Right.
So how long we are going to continue to identify with that rule and with that rulers, with those rulers? I'm sorry. So certain positions there have to be are requiring U-turns.
Yes.
That is why I say again and again in your conversation that the lines have to be redrawn. Agenda has to be recrafted and redrafted.
Right.
The priorities have to change. Otherwise, you live in ghettos or you live in an A-class posh colony. If your mentality hasn't changed, your quality of living has done nothing to you.
Sure.
The ears have to be opened, the eyes have to be opened, the mind has to be opened, the initiative has to be learned how to take it, read pulse of the time, is work with. Even if I am a person, who believe for my community, even if I consider you as being my worst of foe and the worst of enemy, I would love to engage with you on the first and foremost priority basis, because for you, I am a challenge. For me, you are a challenge. And it is the primary responsibility of both of us to come into engagement, intense engagement, talk freely and frankly. The Constitution gives you, the civil society gives you space, our media gives you space, our governance gives you space. So why are you shy?
But Dr. Khwaja, do you think that such an environment could be brought about, where you have this kind of heart-to-heart conversation? Is there a scope, as in?
Plenty of scope. It is only a question of intent. If you have the intent and you are committed to that intent and what you are uttering, if your utterings are actual, I'm sorry to use the word, if they are actual and not ritual,
Right.
in most of the cases, such conversations are ritual. So this ritualism has to go and it has to be replaced by realism.
Right.
This country, its civilization, its values provide plenty of scope. Here is a country where everybody came and settled down.
Right.
All religions are there. All 72 sects of Muslims are here. They are not in Egypt, they are not in Pakistan.
Yes.
Here nobody is giving fatwa that you are not a Muslim anymore.
Yes.
So in such a beautiful environment, how long we are going to crib?
Right.
No, will we ever look within ourselves?
Now, let me ask you that if Muslims are able to penetrate, let me use the word penetrate
Okay.
into BJP,
Okay.
will they be in a better position to do good for the community or the country?
Two things.
Yes.
Number one, no Muslims are with BJP. It is a notion. There are quite a good number of Muslims which are working with BJP at various levels, whether as spokespersons or as portfolio holders or as party position holders and so on and so forth. The Muslims have risen up to the vice president level. There was a time when Sikandar Bakht was there. He was a very dynamic vice president, very active, very dominating and prevailing. It all depends on the quality of the person also. I'm not questioning any question on those who are holding the position, but performance speaks for itself,
Right.
and that creates a scope. How much you can penetrate and how much penetration can be afforded by the organization, because organization has a much larger objective.
Of course.
All right. So as per figures available, 79% Muslims also vote for BJP.
Yes,
So that's
of
one
course.
point. We should remember that.
Right.
Now, about penetration. Why penetration? Why not open joining? Since I am talking about BJP and I am talking about Sangh from day one, and this is from 1996 onwards, not to praise myself, just to quote.
Right.
For the last 26 years, I have taken an open position on engagement. Now many have started taking that position. Good. So things are changing on ground.
Sure.
So there's no need to penetrate. Go from the front door, go nicely, gracefully, and be part of BJP. And nobody in BJP asks you
Right.
to put a tilak. I'm being blunt, you know me well.
Yes.
Nobody asks you to put a tilak on your... All right.
On your forehead. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Sure.
And nobody tells you when you join BJP, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you have to do this, otherwise out. When you yourself take to roots which they are not demanding,
Right.
sometimes you become too nationalist, I'm sorry to say.
Two nationalists.
Too nationalist. Be practical and pragmatic. BJP is like any other political party, right?
Yes.
No need of penetration. Go and join. Live on your terms.
Right.
If your terms are correct and logically and rationally provable, prove them.
Right. Right.
My personal experience of life is that if you have the content,
Right.
you have the rationale.
Sure.
When you miss out on content,
Right.
you lose on rationale.
Right.
And most of the people are like that.
Yeah, I differ with you on one point that
Please.
when it comes to nationalism, I think that's the supreme for all of us. While Indian Muslims
So,
need to be,
in what context you are saying this?
I'm saying
differ?
that I'm saying that nationalism, the political nationalism should be overriding all political, interest or.
But you have not addressed any question on nationalism to me straight away. Let me answer you on nationalism.
Right.
Okay. Nation is supreme. So is nationalism. National interest comes above everything.
Right.
Because what is national interest? security, sovereignty, development, being together, togetherness,
Sure.
societal coherence, coexistence.
Right.
All this together. What will come before this? Nothing.
Right.
Nation and nationalism first, there's no doubt about it. And there is no question of any negotiation on that. So that goes without saying. That runs in our blood and breed.
Right.
I don't know where you could gauge that you have to differ with me on nationalism.
No, the one point which you made, but anyhow, I get your point. Now, Indian Muslims need to be careful with their assumptions and should carefully weigh the pros and cons of the political realities of time. They should not get carried away with any of the biases or false feeling of supremacy. They must be wise in choosing the political options before it is too late, as Dr. Khwaja was saying. To read our website, type www.awazthevoice.in and do not forget to subscribe our social media handles. I wish to thank my guest, my learned guest, Dr. Khwaja Iftikhar Ahmed Saab. Thank you, Iftikhar Ahmed Saab, for being here, and you're fasting today in the month of Ramzan. Thank you so much. I wish to thank again my guest, and we'll be back soon with another interesting topic of discussion. Till then, goodbye from the Matrix.
Thank you so much from my side also.